This is the Woodward Fire press briefing for Friday, August 28th. I'm Steve Sobieschik, Public Information Officer. I'm joined today with Operations Section Chief Brandon Chikowski, Fire Behavior Analyst John Trapp, Lieutenant Brennan Collins with the Marin County Sheriff's Office, and Jason Weber, the Fire Chief with Marin County. First up, we're going to bring Brandon out to give us a little operational update.
Good morning, everybody. I first want to start off. Yesterday, I missed talking to you folks. We were dealing with an incident on the fire line. So one of the areas over just right behind, not too far behind the visitor center there with the park headquarters. We had a couple firefighters get injured by a fork top tree that broke apart and caught several crew members there with some falling debris. Two of those crew members were taken by ground ambulance down to the local hospital. One was released yesterday. The other one was expected to be released today. So there was a very fortunate outcome that definitely could have had some very serious ramifications. A lot of this terrain that we are dealing with and the vegetation that we're dealing with, a lot of folks may not be real familiar with. Later in that afternoon, we one of our roads, the Bear Valley Trail, that is over here on the east side of the fire. Some folks are there, and there was a large tree that came over. Fire kind of finally burned through it, and I say large tree, it was 5-foot diameter Douglas fir that came over the road and impeded egress for resources. So that are the kinds of fuels that we are dealing with, some steep terrain, very large diameter fuels, and a lot of hazards out there to our firefighters. So as we want to take a little tour here around the fire, I'm going to start over here on the coast, or on the western side of the fire, which we call coming off the coast on the west initially, we call Division Zulu. Starting to look pretty good, especially coming off that thick, tall, up to 7-foot tall coastal scrub. The dozers kind of got into there, and there was only about 800 feet that they couldn't get to that we had to complete with some hand line. A couple 20-person crews in there, making a fire break, getting the scrub back, and then digging down to bare mineral soil. So we do have some line all the way up through there, and as we progress up into the next division just north of that, still on the west side of the fire up to where the intersection of Sky Trail, Z Trail is, that's all a combination of dozer line and hand line. Folks have been working it. Right now it is holding, but we still have numerous days of mop up. We're going to have a lot of commitment of resources in there with water and hand tools, and basically taking all the heat out, all the embers, and start mopping up so we have a good perimeter for when things get hot, dry, and we get shifts in winds, change in winds, that we don't get spotting into fuels that haven't burned. Overall things in there are going pretty good. This area up in here, we talk about the division break, and the red dots, a DP, a drop point, and it's one of our common meeting places for resources. So you'll see the drop points listed throughout a fire area all the way to the other side, DP 10. It's an easy reference points on our maps, and they're signed out there on the landscape. So when we call a resource, we can say, meet me at DP 5. It's a common place. It's a little bit easier than the large tree next to the second short tree. So that's kind of where that stuff comes into play. We have a lot of prep done on Limitour Road. I'm feeling very good about a lot of that stuff. As we've moved down into the fire area, and our H being a helispot, if we have any medical evacuations that we need to do, our air folks have an exact lat long of that location so they can fly right to there and pick somebody up. We did get some new infrared last night, infrared mapping from overnight flight. And so you can see on the map, we did increase in size a little bit by a few hundred acres, and that growth was mainly over through Wittenberg Trail area and the Meadow Trail area, and down into parts of the Bear Valley Trail. That's where our growth is and most of the fire activity. Okay, so that piece is actually looking pretty good. in the sense that it's kind of allowed us to focus on some other areas of the fire, and mainly that focus as it comes down into the Bear Valley Trail. That's where our focus is turned to right now, and trying to secure some of these lines. What we're actively doing, yesterday we started, and today we're continuing it, and this will be going on for several days. We're actually initiating some fire to the west of Bear Valley Road, Fire's Edge, to be able to bring it down to the Bear Valley Trail. And what that's going to do is we can bring the fire to us in a place that we feel more comfortable, safer, and our control lines are better. One of the things we don't want to do with a lot of this area, describe those trees, the accident that happened, is trying to reduce the risk to the firefighters out there on the line is very important to us. And this is one way that we can do that. So we're using a small unmanned aircraft and doing some ignition in that area. And we're also doing a combination of lighting from the ground by hand along the trail, just kind of starting to work it down. And right now we're getting a very good mosaic kind of burns, mainly all understory, and things are going good as we kind of bring it down to our control line, which is Bear Valley Trail over here on this side. Night shift, we still have a night shift out there. Every night, this is the third night in a row, and they're monitoring the road, making sure it's staying there. We did have the spot and where the firefighters did get injured. That does have line back around it and is contained at this time. Also has a hose lay on it, and we're being very cautious in areas like that. The other thing is we continue with our folks out in the structure protection areas. We're doing, should be finishing up, I believe, today and or midday tomorrow with some structure assessments. That a lot of great help from Marin County Fire and their defensible space team that they have, up to 16 people, just going through and doing assessments, talking to folks about defensible space and what needs to get done out there to better fireproof their home in the area, okay, for future events and this event. It's all still right here. So overall, that's what we have going out on fire line right now. Thank you.
Okay, so
You just hold on to that. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is John Trapp. I'm a fire behavior analyst from Montana, and I wanted to start off with just saying something real quick. Today is the birthday of my daughter. She's turning 14 and she's in Montana. Her name's Analyst, and so I wanted to tell her, she's watching this with her classroom right now. So happy birthday, Analyst. And it's also birthday of my father, who's in Arizona. So 2 birthdays today, and that's very common for firefighters to be during the summer out on fires and not being able to be with their families. So to all the firefighters, to their families, we appreciate you. We wish we could be with you. But so fire behavior analyst, and then also my other daughter, Caitlin, is watching as well. So hello. So what a fire behavior analyst does, and my wife. Hello. Sorry. I'll get this going here. Hello, Heather. All right. And so a fire behavior analyst comes with these larger incidents. What we do is we look at 3 key factors. Over here, you can see on this graphic here. The last few days, Jeremy, the incident meteorologist, has been in and been talking with you and explaining what's going on with the weather. That's a really key part. But there's other things that we look at that really affect what the fire is going to do. And that's what I work on, as well as the other fire behavior analyst who is working on the fire, as well as long-term analysts. So lots going in, trying to understand what the fire is going to do, where it's going to go, how hot it's going to be, how quick it's going to move. So as I mentioned, Jeremy had talked a lot about the weather. It's great to have an incident meteorologist that they just focus right here. This is all they're looking at, is what's going to affect us on the fire line. The big thing that's been mentioned over and over is that marine layer. So it comes in, and often when it comes in, it brings high relative humidities with it, which then dampen down the fire behavior. So when we see that come in, Okay, yep. So when we see that come in, we can start to realize that the fire behavior is going to settle down. So I was cued to kind of talk about this fire triangle here. So this is the wildland fire triangle. And on this graphic, what we're seeing here is three things that are important to us. We have weather, which I'm talking about right now. We have fuels, which is what's burning on the landscape, and we have topography. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those. On the weather side of things, with that marine layer is a huge influence, as well as winds that come in and temperatures. All those things affect fire behavior. So Jeremy's been doing a really good job of keeping us up to speed on what that is doing with the weather. And then where I take over from that point is working with the fuels and the topography. So I'll start with the topography here. And many of you who have been to this area and have hiked around it understand what the topography is here, right? There's lots of drainages, there's lots of hills and valleys and peaks and trails. And so all those things affect how the fire moves on the landscape. So, you know, a south-facing slope is going to get more solar radiation earlier in the day, and therefore it's going to burn hotter and faster compared to a north-facing slope, which will be cooler and more shaded. So all that's a dynamic thing that's changing on with the topography. Also, what we have with all these canyons that come up from the ocean, most of them are kind of running southwest to northeast in orientation. What happens with those during the days is often there's heating from the sun when it comes up, and that causes upslope winds, up valley winds. And so that can bring the fire up during the day and back down at night. So that's another factor that is usually very significant on fires, but with the marine layer, it's less significant. So overall, the topography here is very
Lost the sound.
And then you go up higher and you get into the bishop pine, Doug fir, redwood type forest type. So each of the, depending on where the fire is burning, those fuels affect the fire behavior. So when we have shrubs that are 6 feet tall and dried out and ready to burn, they can put up flame lengths as high as 15, 20 feet. And they can move very fast when the wind's pushing it. So that comes back to the weather part of it, right? So if we have strong winds pushing the fire and those fuels, it will move rapidly. As we move into the heavier fuels, when it's burning in those bishop pine and the Doug fir, the fuel can stay, a lot of heat in that area, and it can stay in there for days, burning in those big heavy rounds, like again, what Brandon mentioned, the big tree that fell down, right? That can hold a lot of heat for many days. And when the conditions are right, the heat picks back up again. Another thing that will happen is when the fire goes from the ground all the way to the canopy of the trees, embers come off those trees. And so that's something that we've been very concerned with, is where are those embers going? And if we have a southwest wind that's pushing, which we've had most of the time that this team has been here, even though we understand that's not the normal wind flow, that's what we've mostly been seeing, that pushes embers in this direction to the northeast. So the structural protection group that's been working up there, they're really focusing on looking for any spots where those embers may come down if the wind picks up. And our models show that with winds as light as 8 miles an hour, we can see spotting distances up to 1 mile from the main fire. So that's very important for us to keep track of. We know right where to look and to stay on top of that. The other thing that we look at that goes with that is what's called the probability of ignition. If a flaming ember comes in the middle of the night, when relative humidity is 100%, the probability of that starting is much less. But in the prime heat of the day, when the RH is down lower, the relative humidity is lower, then we have a much more likelihood that that ember will start a new fire. So those are the things that the fire behavior analyst considers on a wildland fire. And there's much more, but that's the basics of it. Fuels, weather, and topography drive fire behavior. And we're doing our best to stay on top of that, to prepare the firefighters on the ground, and also to let the community know what's going on. Thank you.
Next up, we got Lieutenant Brendan Collins.
Morning, my name is Brendan Collins. I'm a lieutenant with the Marin County Sheriff's Office. I'm stepping in for Brenton Schneider this morning, who is in much need of a day off. Basically, just wanted to get you up to speed on evacuation warnings and orders in the Point Reyes area. All evacuation orders and warnings from yesterday are still in effect today. There's an evacuation order for Silver Hills Road area of Point Reyes that was evacuated a couple days ago, and the evacuation warning for Inverness, Inverness Park communities, Drakes View, Sea Haven, are still currently in evacuation warning status. The evacuation warning also covers the Greenbridge Road, which is Highway 1, just south of Point Reyes Station, Lagunitas Creek, all the way south to the community of Bolinas, and east to the Bolinas Ridge, to the McCurdy Fire Road. That area is still currently under evacuation warning only. And like I just said, the only evacuated area from the Point Reyes area at this time right now is the Silver Hills community with the streets of Fox Drive and Norin Way are still on evacuation order. There have been a couple questions that have arisen as far as to animals in the evacuated area, or in case you need to be evacuated to care for your pets or animals that need to be sheltered or fed. The Marin Humane Society has asked that you reach out to them for those type of purposes. They can be reached at area code 415-883-4621. And they also have information on their website at marinhumane.org. Once again, their phone number is 415-883-4621. There have also been some questions to the Sheriff's Office regarding the use of the high-low siren. The high-low siren will be implemented in the event of an evacuation order. However, it is a supplemental tactic to our evacuation procedures. It is not the only tactic that we will deploy during an evacuation. You will be alerted via Alert Marin, Nixo alerts, Twitter alerts, as well as a deputy knocking door to door in the evacuated community or another law enforcement representative. We won't just rely on a high-low siren and then leave the area and consider that an evacuation order. It's just a supplemental tactic, but it will be used in the event of an evacuation. We also want to remind you that the Sheriff's Office has 24-hour patrol of the Point Reyes community in these areas that are under evacuation warning. We are in partnership with our law enforcement allies in the California Highway Patrol, the National Park Service, and the California State Park Service as well, to provide you with 24-hour patrols of the evacuation warning areas and the evacuated community in the Silver Hills area. They are on duty 24 hours a day. We also encourage you to call in any suspicious activity that you may see in the evacuation warning areas. As Sergeant Steiner said yesterday, we did have an incident where a subject was contacted inside of the stolen car in one of the evacuation warning areas. You know your communities very, very well. You are very good at telling us what is suspicious in your communities. Please relay that information to the Sheriff's Office so we can investigate it. That's all I have for this morning. I ask that you have a good day and stay safe. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. A couple things I want to hit on. You heard from our operations chief, Brendan, and John, the fire behavior analyst. I want to reinforce that every decision that's made here on this fire is very thoughtful. We go through a process. He talked about the fuels, topography, and weather, how that plays a role into it. Operationally, what resources we have available to complete those assignments, and other things like that. So when they talk about this is a challenging fire. The same challenges they're having, you see on Santa Cruz and the fire in northern Sonoma County. This landscape is challenging, and the fuels are extremely challenging. And that's why when you look at this, there's no clean lines on this. We have to get this cleaned up to a point where we feel really secure that the fire line isn't going to jump in a week or two when we have winds or other things. So when they talk about their operational plan and adding, some areas where they're doing firing operations, this is because we need a clean line to work from to make sure we can hold it from here out for the rest of the summer, because we're going to be challenged with weather events and other things weeks after this. And there's a lot of heat in this because of the fuel they talked about. So I want to make sure I cover that and why you understand this seems like it's not moving as fast as it could in some cases. We have to be thoughtful. We have to plan this to be secure. So when we shed resources from this eventually, we can hold those lines. There's some questions about evacuation repopulation. This is something we also take very seriously. We don't want to put residents on a yo-yo and have them leave, come back, and have to leave again. And as Brendan talked about, we've got some challenges here on the east side of this fire and the north side, and that's why Silver Hill still remains in the evacuation order area, and the other warnings are there. Our weather is a little drier and hotter today, so we'd expect we're going to see a little bit more fire behavior out there. Another reminder for our North Marin water and Inverness water customers, we ask that you not turn on sprinklers and sprinkler your area, either preventatively or if an evacuation order is issued. We don't have enough water up there in those systems to be able to use for firefighting and that purpose, and that stuff dries off in about an hour, so it doesn't have the effect that you might think it does. So with that, we understand this is stressful for the community. We appreciate your patience as you work with us and the team that's bringing this information to you. You're getting the same briefing we're all getting as fire professionals, so you're hearing everything that we are, and we thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Okay, a few more things before we end today's briefing. First up, fire information for you. The acres burned is still 2,860. We're at 8% containment. There are now 482 personnel on site. That includes 13 hand crews, 28 engines, 5 helicopters, 5 bulldozers, 2 planes, and 2 masticators. In addition, for the fire camp and for incident command posts, for those of you in the San Geronimo area, the San Geronimo golf course is where incident command base is. We have a fire camp at Samuel P. Taylor, which we will be moving the firefighters from there down to the golf course as part of the San Geronimo golf course complex. So if you're in the area and you do see lots of tents, lots of trucks, lights at night, generator sounds, that is because of the camp going on here for the fire. There will also be added security around, so those who are riding horses or hiking in the area, you may see added security around the fire camp as well. For those who are listening on the phone, calling in through Zoom, we mentioned yesterday's briefing that we are going to change our Zoom login information starting tomorrow. So the Zoom call-in number will still remain the same. So for those on the phone, if you're calling in, the phone number remains 669-900-6833. So the Zoom number, phone in, is still the same at 669-900-6833. But the meeting ID starting tomorrow is going to be 833-4386-1107. So the meeting ID changes to 833-4386-1107. There's no longer going to be a login password, so we're going straight to a meeting ID, and you can call in or log into the computer with that information. We'll also post the updated information on our INSEE website as well as our Facebook captioning area. Speaking of which, we're also going to be extending our live stream to YouTube as well. So for those who don't have access to Facebook and you want to watch online, and you can't access some of the other options, we will have a YouTube streaming. The links of that will be put into our Facebook Live. Those watching on Facebook Live, you don't have to change anything. That will continue as is moving forward. So with all those news and notes out of the way, thank you for watching. That's all we have for today's briefing. Join us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for Saturday's briefing. Thank you.